So as you may or may not know from the 1, 2, 3, 4 times it says it on our string box, we are in Nashville, Tennessee. And being a guitarist in Nashville, Tennessee, the thought of Nashville Tuning comes up. Not because everyone in Nashville is using Nashville Tuning, but because it's named for the city, and that's where we are. And so, yeah, well, you get what I'm saying. So we've talked about Nashville Tuning on this channel in the past, but if you haven't seen that video, the gist of it is what you're doing is keeping the same strings on the E and the B on your guitar, but you're taking the E, A, D, and G strings from a 12-string set, or just building a custom set these days, such that they're an octave higher. So when you're playing the guitar, you have basically the bottom 4 strings an octave higher, takes out a lot of that boomy bassiness, and it was originally used in Nashville studios for like strummed parts on an acoustic guitar, so that it kind of fit better in the mix and sat on top of everything rather than getting into the meat of the mix where you have your bass and your drums and your other guitars and all that sort of good stuff. So I like Nashville Tuning. I sometimes keep a guitar set up in Nashville Tuning because it's a pretty fun thing to explore. And that led me to today's topic, which is what if we take the concept of Nashville Tuning, but do it in C standard? What I think is cool about this is that we're taking the bottom 4 strings and tuning them up an octave in theory, but if we take the whole set then and tune it down 2 whole steps or 4 half steps, we end up with kind of like a weird middle ground where the lower 4 strings are going to be tuned up halfway from where they would normally in Nashville Tuning, and then the high E and B will be tuned down 4 steps. I really have no idea how this is going to go, but I think it's a pretty cool concept. I think that could lend some pretty cool tones, and I thought we would explore it today. So I went ahead and built a custom set. I used our tension calculator at tension.stringjoy.com, what I always use to pick custom sets if I don't kind of already know what I'm going to be doing. And I arrived on these gauges. We're going to be going 13, 17, 11, 15, 24, 32. So it's a really weird and odd kind of set of strings, but it's the same general ethos that we use in Nashville Tuning sets, just with some heavier gauges since we're going to be tuning down. A lot of Nashville sets have just a wound low string. We're going to have a wound 5th and 6th string to make everything work on this set. I have really no idea what this is going to sound like, but I'm excited to explore it, so I'm going to go ahead and get tuned up, and then we'll go in the other room and see what the heck it sounds like. All right, so altogether we are tuned C, F, A sharp, D sharp, G, C. It's a weird tuning. It's not one I have ever heard of before. I mean, C standard I have, but not with the bottom 4 up an octave. We're doing this all on a Gibson Les Paul. I've got Firebird pickups in this guy, which are awesome, but so it sounds a little bit brighter than your average Les Paul. And I have not plugged it in yet. I am super stoked to hear what this sounds like. I'm just gonna screw around for a little bit, and then we'll talk about what it sounded like afterwards. Let's kick on a little bit of overdrive and see what happens with that. And then, as always, let's see what it sounds like with a little bit of fuzz. So I wanted to play around a little bit before I shared my thoughts. I mean, I had my own ideas about how I thought this was going to go. But now that I've heard it all, I'm probably even more of a big fan than I thought I was going to be. I mean, whenever you get to alternate tunings, you get to add a lot of interesting layers to things that you know. But I love that just, simple things sound so cool. Like. having that ability to play normal chord shapes, which is the beauty of Nashville Tuning, but add that extra sparkle is super cool. And in this range, in the C range, it doesn't feel so extreme. It almost feels, it feels closer to the normal timbre of a normal guitar, just with that interesting Nashville Tuning jangly effect. And then the thing that I always love about Nashville Tuning is when you're running down a pentatonic scale, you get that jump in octave, which is kind of where the... there's just something about that that's kind of fun to me. I know it's very simple, but it's really cool to have that. And again, to have that in a normal range that's not so high is pretty fun. So overall, I would call this experiment as a success. I'd be curious to even kind of use this concept with a little bit of a lower overall vibe, or to try it in open tuning. So maybe that'll be fodder for another video. But if you want to try something like this, I would highly encourage you, just make sure you get your tensions right. Tension.stringjoy.com is our free tension calculator. Even if you don't play our strings, you can use it to help kind of get you in the ballpark of what custom set would work great. But I would recommend this. I'm going to honestly keep this guitar strung up like this for a while and see what sort of interesting adventures it leads me into.